Video games can be a pretty expensive hobby. Every few years, a new, more powerful console generation is introduced, and PCs steadily get beefier and beefier, able to play longer, more realistic, and more visually stunning games. And all of that is just the cost of entry. A new AAA title is going to run you $60 each time you want to buy a new game. Now there are other options, like waiting a while for the price to drop, or even the ever-growing and always inspiring indie game market. As the industry goes, so too do the people passionate about it. We are currently in a golden age of gaming, where people who grow up playing games are now the ones making the games, so they're more in tune with their potential audience and can provide an experience like no other. One thing that gamers are extremely passionate about is making sure that they get their money's worth. There's nothing worse than building the hype for a game over the months or even years leading up to its release, finally getting your hands on it, and being completely finished with it in a matter of hours. Now, smart devs know that if they want to keep their customer base happy and keep the money flowing for their next project, there needs to be a sense of value. Games now are fully loaded, robust main story campaigns, side quests, collectibles, trophies, DLC, and a host of other content to keep hungry gamers satisfied. Some games even go so far as to offer a secondary playthrough, multiple playable characters, or in some cases, different ways of customizing your player character so that no two experiences are alike. It's to a point now where, depending on how much of a game you want to experience, your total playtime may be anywhere from 20 hours to well over 100. But you know what sucks? Being forced to play the game multiple times. Alright, that may be being a bit dramatic. Nobody's holding a gun to my head and saying, "Play it!" I said, "Play it!" Yeah, that's a good little puppet. What I'm talking about is the idea of locking a game's true or best ending behind multiple playthroughs. Now, I don't balk at the idea of multiple playthroughs on principle. It is a great way to extend the life of a game and offer players a new, unique challenge. Take, for example, Castlevania: Symphony of the Night. On the surface, the game is just about you, as Alucard, son of Dracula, on a quest to destroy Castle Dracula once and for all. Symphony of the Night features multiple endings, depending on a few set tasks. As you explore the castle, you'll encounter Richter Belmont and Maria Renard, two characters from the previous game, Rondo of Blood. Richter appears to be acting rather strangely, claiming to be the new lord of the castle with a plan to resurrect Dracula. Now if you take this at face value and simply kill Richter, congratulations, you got the bad ending. However, if you further explore the castle, talk to Maria, and find some special items, you'll discover that Richter is possessed. Breaking the spell unlocks the inverted castle, and the game essentially doubles in length. Not only that, but by inputting your name as Richter on the file creation screen, you'll play the whole game as Richter. This is an unnecessary additional gameplay mode, but it's a great way for people who want to re-experience the game in a different way with different abilities. If you're just in it for the main story, you can defeat Dracula and move on to the next big adventure. Now, this isn't the only example of this exact scenario, obviously. Even looking at other Castlevania games, such as Order of Ecclesia on the DS, which has a New Game Plus with a different character. In general, I'm in favor of having, for lack of a better term, a completion bonus, where finishing the game once rewards the player with a code or New Game Plus, where everything is the same, just harder. The granddaddy example of that is Super Mario Bros. Upon finishing the game the first time, the player is rewarded with a hard mode. Pressing B allows you to select a world, but it also replaces all Goombas with Buzzy Beetles, ground enemies walk faster, and the lifts are shorter. This is a great way to reward dedicated players who are looking for an additional challenge, but it doesn't force you into it to get the full game experience. In that same vein is Super Mario Galaxy, where completing the game once rewards you with being able to play as Luigi, or Skyward Sword, which unlocks Hero Mode, where enemies hit harder and don't drop hearts. You also see this in the Souls series, where each subsequent playthrough gets exponentially more difficult, up to a certain point. Well, so far in this video, I've spent a lot of time building up good examples of replayability. Games that reward the player for their hard work with bonus challenge, or games that offer multiple endings through branching paths or character choices. So let's really dig in. What do I mean when I say replayability done wrong? Well, let's start simple and with the game that inspired me to make this video, The Cave. If you're unfamiliar, The Cave is a 2013 puzzle platform adventure game directed by legendary adventure game designer Ron Gilbert and developed by Double Fine Productions. You'd think that with such a fine pedigree, there wouldn't be a thing to complain about. Well, obviously there's plenty to complain about, otherwise I wouldn't be making this video. Gameplay of The Cave tasks players with choosing 3 of 7 playable characters who will work in tandem to explore the titular cave, solving puzzles with teamwork and uncovering some dark secrets. Each of the characters has a unique ability and a unique set of puzzles that only they can solve. Additionally, there are several rooms which any mix of characters can solve, regardless of their abilities. Now therein lies the problem. You'll notice that each time you play, you choose 3 characters from a pool of 7. So, if you want to experience the full scope of the game and learn each of the characters' histories and what brought them to the cave, and indeed complete the game, you are required to play no less than 3 times. Now this wouldn't be so bad if there was enough variation, but on your second playthrough half the puzzles will be the same, and on your third, almost all of them will be the same. And this is what I mean when I say it feels forced. It's no secret that this concept draws big inspiration from Gilbert's earlier games, especially Maniac Mansion, but it simply doesn't work in this context. In general, I think The Cave is a great game, if a little bit flawed. The puzzles are fun and inventive, and the character-driven story really makes me want to play more. However, this aspect of it really took away from the experience. A great fix for this would have been to keep the character's unique abilities, but depending on which team you choose changes how you are able to solve each room's puzzles, and give the player a different avenue to explore, and let them determine how to achieve their goals. Let's rewind a little bit and have a look at a way that this could have been executed in a much more elegant fashion. A perfect example of this is the first Resident Evil. At the outset of the game, you are given the choice between 2 characters, Jill Valentine or Chris Redfield. Depending on which character you choose, your gameplay experience will differ. Jill has more inventory and firepower and a lockpick that gives easier access to certain areas, but Chris can take more damage from enemies. And it's mostly just a matter of how you want to play the game. The overall experience of the game, however, is exactly the same. Explore the mansion, uncover the mysteries of the death of Joseph Frost, and escape with your life. Now there are multiple endings to the game depending on what you do, but there's no need to play the game a second time unless you really want to. The overall experience doesn't change dramatically, and indeed the best endings for each campaign only vary insofar as what characters are present. Of course, if you're playing the modern remake and are a trophy fiend, you will have to play the game twice to get all the trophies. But that's perhaps for another video. Now let's pick at some more nits, shall we? Admittedly, this is tangentially related, but still in the same general sphere. Honestly, I just want to put this game on blast. Donkey Kong 64 is a cluster of bad decisions. For the time being, let's focus on the multiple characters aspect. DK64 is a massive game with 8 worlds, 200 total goals to complete, and a cadre of minigames. I love a big game with lots to do because it keeps me coming back. The problem DK64 runs into is just how much backtracking has to be done. In addition to each of the main goals, each character has 100 color-coded bananas and color-coded coins, each of which can only be collected by their associated Kong. It's not as bad in the later levels, which are more specifically engineered for the 5 different characters, but they do still involve a lot of backtracking. For example, if you go down a path only to discover it's designed for a different character, you have to trek all the way back to the character select barrel, of which there are only a handful per stage, and then back to the place where you were initially exploring. Additionally, because you unlock the characters as you progress in the game, you'll find yourself going back to the early levels and treading the same ground over and over. To reiterate, having the different characters with different abilities is a cool way to expand the variety of the game, but because there are so many collectibles and so much backtracking, the game ends up feeling bloated instead of expansive. A great way to mitigate part of this would be to have all the Kongs available from the start, and to be able to switch on the fly, much like the Super Nintendo trilogy. In those games, either of the 2 playable characters, depending on which game you play, have different abilities that you need to accomplish different goals. The variety of characters in DK64 seems like the natural evolution of this, but something must have been in the water to give us this mutation. Now, backtracking isn't inherently bad. A lot of modern games, especially platformers and collectathons, involve backtracking. As you go through the game, you get more powerful, unlock abilities that help you get things and access areas you couldn't reach earlier in the game. Hell, roguelikes and roguelites are built entirely around the principle of backtracking, grinding, and getting more powerful to eventually beat the game. Granted, the backtracking isn't as blatant, as one of the key features of roguelikes is procedurally generated dungeons, meaning that each time you start a new game or life or whatever, the dungeon layout is going to be different, but the difficulty of each room or floor will remain largely the same. Alright, I got a bit off track there, so let's go back to the original thesis of this video, which is giving the player the illusion of choice at the beginning of the game, only to force you into taking the other choices to view the complete or final story, is dumb and bad. Let's talk about how much I hate Sonic Adventure. Sonic Adventure is another game that has a lot of problems, but the illusion of choice is chief among them. This is sort of in the same vein as Donkey Kong 64, where there are multiple characters to play as, but to get the full experience, you'll ultimately end up needing to play the game with every single character. Look at the classic games, especially Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Those games gave you an actual choice of which character you use, either Sonic and Tails, Sonic alone, Tails alone, or Knuckles, and depending on which character you choose, you got a different experience, but ultimately was the same game. Sonic Adventure, on the other hand, does offer you multiple characters, but each character not only has their own mechanics, but also their own stages. As you play through each character, the stories intersect and overlap. With Tails there is a lot of overlap, ultimately leading to the final conclusion of the game. To be clear, I don't think that this is an inherently bad idea. It's the execution I have a problem with. In fact, this was done much more successfully with Sonic Adventure 2. You'll still be given a choice to play as the good side or the bad side, and in fact you will have to play as both sides to get the full story, and both sides have a lot of crossover. But within each of these storylines, the perspective switches between the 3 different characters per team, each with a unique playstyle and unique stages, ultimately coalescing into the final battle. It was a much more elegant solution that left a much more lasting impact. One last example, and then I'm ready to wrap this up, and I saved the best for last. Let's talk about the granddaddy of them all, Ghosts and Goblins. If you have even a passing knowledge of this game, I'm sure you know exactly where this is going. The Ghosts and Goblins series is well known for its difficulty. It will test your skills and reflexes just as much as it tests your patience. It's a really well-designed game, and if you're up to the challenge, well worth playing. Now if you're unfamiliar, the game puts you in the shoes, or rather greaves, of Sir Arthur as he attempts to rescue Princess Prin Prin from Satan. No, seriously, that's the plot of the game. Along the way, you'll encounter the titular ghosts and goblins, as well as zombies, ogres, dragons, demons, and a wealth of other monsters. At the start, you're equipped with only a lance and the armor on your back. As you make your way through the game's 6 stages, you can collect different weapons, some of them amazing, some of them frustrating and terrible. Oh, and did I mention that it's 2 hits and you're done? Oh, and also, you maintain your momentum when you jump. Like I said, it's a crazy hard game. Once you get to the end of stage 6, you'll fight the ultimate boss. Not 1, but 2 Satans. Well, just like everything else in this game, the final boss is crazy hard, but eventually you'll succeed and be rewarded with a swift kick in the crotch. The game tells you, guess what, idiot? You need the special weapon to get to stage 7 and the actual final boss. Go back to stage 5 and try again. Okay, fine. You make your way through stage 5 and 6 again, this time making sure to pick up the special weapon that you apparently need. Beat the 2 Satans again, and then it's finally time to lay the smackdown to the real final boss and rescue the princess. Astaroth is definitely no pushover, but you're Sir Arthur, damn it! You have to rescue the princess. It's your destiny or whatever. And so you do it. You defeat Astaroth and rescue the princess. Nope! This is when the game delivers the ultimate f*** you and tells you that everything you just did was an illusion devised by Satan. You have to play the entire game again from the beginning. Only this time, it's way harder. Because of course it is! The enemies move faster and attack more frequently, making an already brutally difficult game just that much more agonizing. And this wasn't just a one-time thing either. Every single game in the series pulls this exact same move, and it doesn't get any more fun. This is the epitome of replayability done wrong. The game tricks you into playing it twice if you want the real ending. It's one thing to offer the added difficulty for players who want the challenge, like in Mario Brothers. But to lock the full game behind something that most people aren't going to have the patience for is pretty much the worst. I don't inherently begrudge a game for offering multiple playthroughs, whether it's through amped up difficulty, alternate characters, or even alternate endings. Any one of these are a great way to encourage a second playthrough or beyond, so long as it doesn't feel forced. My issue comes in when games give you the illusion of choice, like when you can pick from multiple characters, but ultimately have to play all of them to get the true ending. Or when the game flat out lies to you and gives you a false ending. Developers are always looking for ways to make sure the player gets their money's worth, and sometimes that means artificially extending the game's length. For the most part, I don't think these are bad games. They just could have executed their ideas better. And if you don't have a problem with this style of narrative, that's great. As for me, I just want to play a game that I enjoy and not feel railroaded into playing it any longer than it seems like I should have to. Well, that's all the time that we have for this week, guys. As always, thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like, and maybe share it with a friend if you think it's something they might enjoy. What did you think about the points that I made? Do you like this kind of thing? Do you agree with the points that I made? Can you think of some examples that I might have missed? Or can you think of some examples of ways that this was executed well? Go ahead and let me know down in the comments, or you can find me on Twitter. I'll be happy to entertain some discussion. Just, keep it civil. Other than that, I think that that's going to do it. So we will see you guys next time, and until then, keep playing.